Steve's not here. Okay, safe flight. Okay. Okay, Rav Meir Omer. So Rav Meir has a statement in the Mishnah that there are things that are like land. Sorry, the Rabbanan say there are things that are. Rav Meir says there are things that are like land and that are not like land, and the Chamim don't agree. Okay, what's the case? It was the grapevines that were loaded with grapes, and the guy said, I gave you 10. He said, no, only 5. So is that considered a partial oath or not? Well, if it's like land, then no. If it's not like land, then yes. So says the Gemara. Michlal derbi meir savar kol hamechuber lekarka eno kekarka. It sounds like according to Rav Meir, anything which is attached to the ground is not considered like ground, because 10 vines with grapes on them, and the guy says no, only 5. Rav Meir says you're obligated to make a swear. That would mean that even though it's attached to the ground, it does not have the same laws as the ground itself. Well, if that's true, ademifligi beteunos, lifligi besrukos. Why do they argue with vines that have grapes on them? They can just argue about vines that don't have grapes on them. The point is, you're attached to the ground. Are you like the ground? Or are you not like the ground? On the one hand, you're outside of the ground, so maybe you're different. On the other hand, you're attached to the ground, and your sustenance is from the ground, so maybe you're the same. So Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, we're talking about Hacha ba'anavim omdos lihibatzer, talking about grapes that sounds like they're ripe already and they're about to be cut off, meaning they're at that stage where it's time to take them off. So we often have this in the Gemara, like things that are about to, things that are about to come off. Are they basically already viewed as off because they fully ripened already? There's a technicality, you have to actually do that cutting, or not. So that's their dispute. Reb Meir Sauer, Kibitzuras Damin, they're already one foot out the door, right? The guy's already got his suitcases packed, whatever. He just technically has a flight, but he's already out the door, right? So these grapes are already out the door, so therefore they're like movables, and you would be liable for the oath of partial admission. No. At the end of the day, they're still attached to the ground, so they're going to be considered like the ground, and therefore there will not be an oath. Okay, now we said that you have to make a shvuah on like something which is definite, which is you can't, this house of produce, no, not that house of produce. It has to be something more specific than that. So, says the Gemara, Amar Abaye lo shanu ela da amar le bayis stam. The case was a house, a shed of produce, a shed full of produce. Aval amar le bayis zeh mole yidiyat. If you say this house, not just I have a shed of produce that I owe you, that you owe me. No, not a full shed, only a little bit of the shed. That's too vague. But if you say this shed of produce, sounds like that would be enough. That would be specific enough to be considered to be qualified for a partial oath. So Amar le Rava ihach. If you're telling me right now that bayis stam and bayis zeh, bayis stam is a general house, you owe me a shed full of produce. No, I only owe you half a shed of produce. Well, that's too general. Which shed? What shed? That doesn't go. But if this shed, the guy's like, no, I only owe you half of that shed. If you're going to tell me that that is the case of vague and specific, so why did the Mishnah choose such a specific example? Amalei Rava Ihachi, the Tani Seifa. Look at the end of the Mishnah when it wants to show you what the case of something specific is. It says Ze Omer Ad Haziz, Ze Omer Ad Chalon. He said up to the corner, the top corner, that's how much you owe me. He says no, up to the window I owe you, not up to the corner. Chayiv. Well, that's such a specific case. Just say it much simpler. Liflog v'lisni b'dida. Say, teach the Mishnah in the case of bayis zeh and bayis stam. Divide it up and teach it like this. What's the case where it's too vague? Bayis mole. Just a general shed full of produce. Aval bayis zeh mole chayiv. But this specific shed, if you identify it, then that's going to be enough. So why don't we just say that's such a simple case? You want to tell me what's the case of vague and specific? Just stick to any shed versus this shed. Why did you go you're so detail oriented up to the corner, no up to the window. This is much simpler. So because of that, Elamar Rav, he'll give a new answer. La'olam eno chayev, really you're only liable ad sheitananunu bedavar shebemida ushbemishchol ushbeminyan. You have to, you have to specifically claim something which has either a weight to it, it has a measurement, it has a number to it. You can't just say this house, that house, to be more specific. And the guy has to admit, the yodlo bedavar shebemida, it has a measurement to it, or it has a weight to it, or it has a number to it, something much more specific. So that's why we said, you owe me up until the top of the shed. No, I owe me up until the window. That's something which is specific, a specific measurement. This house versus any house, that's not specific enough. So Tanya Kavasa Brisa supports the opinion of Rava. Kur tvua libyadcha. You owe me a kur. It's a measurement of produce. The halo omer no, nothing doing. So you're exempt because you denied the whole thing. Exempt. So that's one case. Second case, menorah gdoli yeshu biyadcha. You owe me a big menorah, a big lamp. So no, the other menorah ktana. I only have a small menorah. Potter. He said menorah gdoli. He said menorah ktana. Separate things. Azura gdola, you owe me a big belt. You took my belt. I only have a small belt of yours. That's all. They're not talking about the same thing. He wants a big belt. You're telling him a small belt. That's also not his admission is not from the claim. Aval amarlo kur tvua yesh libiyadcha. You owe me a measurement of tvua. V'halo omer ein lecha biyadi ela lesech. And he says a kur? No, I only owe you a lesech. It's a smaller measurement of produce. Then you're chayiv. Similarly, menorah bat eser litrin. You owe me a menorah, some kind of lamp that is 10 litrin. I think litrin's a weight, right? It's the weight of 10 litrin. And the guy responds, Yesh biyadcha. He said, no, ein chabed ela bas chamish litrin. He said, no, it wasn't a 10-weight menorah. I actually owe you a 5-weight menorah. So now we're going to say you're chayiv. I have to explain why. Okay, because you would say also it's two separate things. 10, the menorah that weighs 10 and the menorah that weighs 5 are separate things. Yet you're liable. We'll see why. Klalo shel davar. What's the general rule? So the Bryce in his last statement tells you what's the general rule. You have to claim something specific with a certain measurement or a weight or a number, and you have to admit to something which has a measurement, a weight, or a number. So that line at the end of the brisa is exactly what Rava said. So you have a brisa explicitly supporting Rava. Now, many times, a brisa or a mishnah ends off a whole list of cases. You should know the general rule is it's always extra. It's coming to include something that you didn't mention so far. So on that, the Gemara says, Klalo shel davar la'asuyemai. The general rule is coming to include something. What's it coming to include? Sounds like there's another case here we're coming to include. So it sounds like it's including even somebody who says bayis zemale. This house that's full of produce. This house that's full of produce. So that's really the case that Rava said it would not work. But we're now suggesting that maybe the Brisa considers when you say this house, that's also something which has a certain measurement to it. Rava would say, no, Baya Zed is not good enough. That doesn't have, it's too general. It doesn't have a specific measurement. But the Brisa right now, we're saying it would include that case. That would also be considered enough of a claim that if a guy denies it, you would get yourself a partial oath. You'd be liable for a partial oath. Well, if Bayis Zeh, this shed, this house full of produce, is enough of a claim that if someone says, no, only half of that house, he'll be liable, what's the difference between that, when you claim you owe me a large lamp, and the guy says, I only have a small lamp of yours, that we understand why you're exempt. Why? What you claimed he didn't admit, what he admitted you didn't claim. He wants a large lamp, he said, I only have a small lamp. That's not a partial admission of what he claimed. That's a separate item that he admitted to. So what's the difference between that and this? So So if that's true, that by a big lamp and a small lamp, you're going to be exempt. If that's true, I think there's a stopping point. We asked, what does it come to include? And it's come to include by zemole. I think that was seems to be somewhat of a comma or period. Now, what's the difference? Why are you exempt when you say a large lamp to a small lamp? Because you're not talking the same language. He wants a big lamp. You're saying I have a small lamp. If that's true, how come all of a sudden, if you say I have a lamp, I want my lamp back, it was 10 weights, it was 10 pounds, and the guy says no, it was only 5 pounds. How come that you're liable? What's the difference? Big lamp? No, I only have a small lamp, exempt. 10-pound lamp? No, 5-pound lamp. You're liable? Why? Amr Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak Hacha b'menorah shel chulios askinan. A menorah shel chulios means it's a menorah. It's like sometimes you have those things that are you can assemble it and disassemble it. It's a menorah full of pieces that can be assembled. So he sounds like he's saying that that this menorah, which can be assembled and disassembled, this menorah is you owe me, I guess 10 pounds of this menorah, and he's saying no. I guess you can make it larger. That's what it sounds like. You can have a menorah and you can keep adding to it. So right, you can keep adding the pieces. Like you have what's an example of it? I don't know. You have things you can just keep adding and adding, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, like leaves to a table, right? You could say the table is 10 feet long. You could say no, it's 8 feet long. What are you basically saying? I owe you the table without the leaf inside. So to here you have a menorah that has many, many pieces. You can make bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So he says, you owe me 10 pounds of this compartmentalized menorah. He says, no, I only owe you 5. But once you establish that it has different pieces, so now when he says 10 and he says 5, they are talking about the same menorah. If you say I want a big menorah, he says I want a small menorah, those are two separate things. But when you have a menorah that has many pieces to it, and the guy says 10 pounds of that menorah belongs to me, he said no, only 5 pounds, other ones belong to me, then you're going to be exempt. Then you're going to be liable a partial oath. So, if that's true, we had a case of a belt. So azura nami, you should say, why is the case of the belt exempt? The case was you owe me a big belt versus a small belt. So why are you exempt? Just say when we mention belt, we're talking also a belt that is bidda lifey. Lifey sounds like also has different parts to it. The belt is, nowadays it's all one buckle, but back then it sounds like you can add parts to the belt. It's like watches. I got this watch, a cheap watch, but I had to unscrew a few of these things, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine you had a belt just like that. So the guy thinks I want a big belt, I only have a small belt. Why are you exempt? Maybe he meant it's a belt with parts. And he said, I want the whole belt. And you're like, no, I only owe you part of the belt. And yet you're exempt. Lokatani, Ella Delaifi Lokatani, we didn't say that we're talking about a belt that has pieces to it. So Hachinami Bishal Chulios Lokatani. So too, if the belt's not talking about a case where there's many pieces to it, then the menorah is also not a case of many pieces to it. And if that's true, then we're back to square one. How come when you say a menorah of 10 and the guy admits to a menorah of 5, you're liable? If it was a menorah of pieces, that's great. But once the belt was not a case of pieces and the menorah was a case of pieces, so then why are you going to be liable? So Ella Rabbi Abba Bar Mamel shiny menorah. So it sounds like a menorah is different because you can drag it and stand it up on chamesh litrin. Meaning what? I guess you could how do they change?
Upside down. No.
The last 2 words before the Mishnah. Right there, the last line.
Since the defendant can scrape a 10-liter candlestick and reduce it by weight.
You could scrape off. Got it. Not drag it. Sorry, to scrape off. Meaning, it's a menorah that you could scrape off the weight and make it weigh less. So therefore, by a menorah, it's still possible that when you say 10, he says 5, that there could still be a case of partial admission, because it's possible that it was scraped down to 5, as opposed to a belt that's not going to work that way. Or it's supposed to, you say a big menorah versus a small menorah, so that's 2 separate things. But at least when he says 10 or 5, that could be talking about the menorah itself. Like,
or a candlestick.
Yeah. Sorry, like, a candlestick. Usually menorah refers to a candlestick. Okay, good. So says the Mishnah. Now we're going to talk about collateral. Collateral. The guy loans, Reuven lends Shimon money, and Shimon gives him a collateral. That is there, that if I can't pay up, I have a collateral. Now, what's going to happen if the collateral is worth less or more than the loan? And now a fight breaks out. You owed me X amount of money, and the collateral gets lost. And now there's a fight. How much was the collateral worth? So a bunch of cases. Hamalves Chaver, one who loans his friend al Hamashkon, and he receives a collateral, but of it Hamashkon, the collateral gets lost. Amar lo, Sela Hilvi Sichalav, I lent you a Sela. A Sela is 4 dinners. Vishekel Hayashava, and your collateral was only worth 1 shekel. So you still owe me 3. You still owe me 2, sorry. You still owe me 2. A shekel is 2 dinners. You owe me 2. So that's what Reuven, the lender, is saying. The borrower is saying, V'halo Omer, lo, Sela, you're right, Sela Hilvisani. You lent me a Sela, that's true. Hilvisani love Visela Hayashava. And my collateral was worth a Sela. And now that you lost my collateral, so now I'm not paying you back, because it was your responsibility. You had the collateral, you lost it. So in that case, it's potter, because there's a full denial. So he's telling you still owe me money. He says nothing doing. That's case 1. Sela Hilvi Sicha. Now the Malva is talking, the lender is talking. Sela Hilvi Sicha. It was, I lent you a Sela, 4 dinners, 2 shekels, and the mashko and the collateral was worth shekel hayashava. It was worth a shekel. So you still owe me 2 more shkalim. V'halo omer. Sorry, you owe me 1 more shekel. V'halo omer lo. The lender, the borrower says lo. Ki ela sela hilvisani. I borrowed from you a sela. For sure, true. V'shlosha dinar hayashava. It wasn't a shekel, the collateral. It was 3 dinarim. So that's 1 more dinner than you're saying. So you want me to pay you 2 dinarim, right? Imagine dollars versus quarters. So the guy says, I lent you $1, and the collateral was worth 50 cents. So you still owe me 50 cents. And the guy says, no, the collateral was worth 75 cents. So I only owe you a quarter. So then you're chayiv, you're partially admitting. He says you owe me 50 cents. You're saying, no, I owe you only 25 cents. That's a classic case of a partial admission, and therefore the borrower will be liable to make an oath of partial admission. Okay, now we're going to flip it from now the borrower is speaking. Sela hilvisani, I borrowed a sela, alav, v'shtayim hayashava, and it was worth 2 selas, which is going to be 8 dinarim, which is going to be 4 shkalim. Sela, I borrowed a sela. And the mashkan I gave you, interestingly enough, was double the amount of the loan. It was double the amount of the loan. So you borrowed something, and I gave you double the amount of the loan. Now the borrower, the lender, is saying, "V'lo omer lo kiela selva hivisichalov v'sela hayashava." So he's saying, and now he lost the collateral. So Mr. Borrower is saying, I lost out a full. You owe me a full sela. You lost my collateral. It was double the amount of the loan. Pay me. And the lender is saying, no, it's not true. It was only worth 1 sela, and therefore I don't owe you that. Therefore you're exempt. Therefore I'm exempt because I took the collateral as payment for your loan, and therefore we're back to we're at square even. We knock each other out. Sela hilvi sunny. The next case is the lender is saying, the borrower is saying, I borrowed a sela. Sela hilvi Vishtayim hayashava. Same thing. The collateral was worth double the amount of the loan. So I borrowed a sela. I gave you something which is twice the amount. V'halo omer, and the lender says, lo, ki ela sela hilvi sichalav. I lent you a sela. V'chamisha dinarim hayashava, but the collateral was worth 5 dinarim. So he wants 4 dinarim more back because you lost the object which he's claiming was a sela, which is 4 dinarim. To that, he's responding that the collateral was only 5 dinarim. 4 of it we're using for payment for the loan, which you never pay me back. 1 more dinner, I only owe you 1 more dinner, not 3 more dinarim. So same thing, the guy loaned $1 and he gave him a collateral worth $2, and now the collateral was lost. So he's saying you owe me another $1 because I borrowed $1, but you lost my $2 object. He's saying $2. No, you're right. I do owe you something, but it was only worth 25 cents. So I owe you 25 cents. I don't owe you a full $1. So therefore, chayiv, that's going to be a classic case of partial admission. I don't know about classic, but it'll be a case of partial admission. He's saying you owe me $1, whatever is a sela, 4 dinarim, and he's responding that he only owes him 25 cents. He only owes him only part of that, and that's considered a partial admission, and therefore a person will be liable for the shvua mode umixas. Now the Gemara says the Mishnah has a cryptic line, and the Gemara is going to jump on this line, and that's what the Gemara is going to start. The Gemara says umi nishba, who makes the shvua? Okay, so that's a cryptic line, and then it says who's going to make a shvua, how much it's worth, who makes that oath? It says the Gemara, mi shapi kadon etzlo, the one who's holding on to the collateral, which means the malva, he makes the oath. Now, what case are we talking about? Are we talking about the beginning of the Mishnah, where the borrower was the one that was partially admitting? Or are we talking about the end of the Mishnah, where the lender was the one that was partially admitting? What is this question focused on? So, Umisha Nishma Misha B'Kadan Etzlo. Why? The one holding the collateral, the lender makes the oath. Why? Because what's going to happen? What's going to happen is, let's say the borrower makes an oath. And then they find out, the way Rashi understands, they find out that the collateral was actually worth the way that the lender was saying. So Reuven borrowed money from Shimon. He gave Shimon a collateral. And now a fight breaks out. How much is the collateral worth? So who's going to make the oath about how much it's worth? So we're saying who has it in his possession, which is usually the lender. He has the borrower's collateral in his possession. He's going to make the oath. Why? Because we're worried that if we let the borrower make the oath and then find out that it was actually worth a different amount, he's going to then make a shvua, a false shvua. The guy's going to pull out the collateral and say, look, and then we're going to get stuck. Okay. Somehow there's never enough time. Yeah. So.
Just learning that.
Yeah. Ready?
Yeah.
You ready? Okay. What is that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Says the Gemara, this last part of the Mishnah, who makes the shvua? What's that going on? Ilema aseifa. If it's talking about the latter case of the Mishnah, where the lender admitted partially, so then v'tepakle the shvua gabe malva. Of course, if the borrower claims you owe him more, and the lender admits that you only own part of it, of course the lender has to make a shvua. There's no novelty in this case. You should know that the lender has to make a shvua. Obviously, Amar Shmuel Aresha. No, it's going on the first case of the Mishnah. V'chein Rav Chia Barav Aresha. V'chein Rav Yochanan Aresha. 3 people say it's going on the first case of the Resha. Which case of the Resha? Mayu Resha. Which part of the Resha? Seif of the Resha. The second half of the first part of the Mishnah, which goes as follows. The guy says, I lent you a sela, and the collateral was worth half of that. Shekel hayashav. It was worth a shekel, which is only half of a sela. The borrower is saying, hello, Omer lo kiel sela hilvisani alav v'shlosha dinarim hayashav. That's not true. The collateral was worth 3 dinarim, not 2, 3 dinarim. And therefore, you want me to pay you 50 cents. I only owe you 25 cents. It was worth 75 cents. So I only owe you 25 cents. So there, the borrower is supposed to make a shvua because he's the one who partially admitted to the oath. Chayiv, the shvua gabe lovihi. The Rabbanan went and they took the shvua that was supposed to be on the borrower and they placed it on the lender. V'shaklu Rabbanan milove v'shajuhu amalva. They took it from the borrower and they put it on the lender. So now, that's that. Now, the Hashta, Rav Ashi in Bava Metzia, says that in a case like this where you lose the collateral, both people have to swear. What are they swearing about? The lender has to swear, I don't have the collateral in my hands. I lost the collateral. Yeah, who believes you? It's in your safe at home. So you have to make an oath that you don't have in your possession. Vizenishba, and the borrower has to make a swear, kamashava, how much it's worth, how much it was worth. So therefore, according to Rav Ashi, the Mishnah reads very smoothly. Hachikamer, that's how you read the Mishnah. Mi nishba techila. They both have to make an oath. Who makes the oath? Mi shapikad netzlo, the one that's holding on to the collateral, or who was holding on to the collateral, which is the lender. He makes the oath. Why? Because if the borrower makes the oath of how much the collateral is worth, what's going to happen? We're worried the lender's going to pull it out, and they're going to see it's worth a different amount, and therefore the guy made a false oath. Therefore he makes the oath. The lender is the first one to make the oath. Amar Shmuel, the guy gives somebody, lends somebody 1,000 zuz, and as a collateral he takes the handle of a sickle. Much less than the actual loan. If the loan's 1,000, it's worth 200, 100, whatever it is. It's a handle of a sickle. How much is that worth? What happened now? Avid kasa demigla, avid alfazuze. If the lender loses the cheap little handle, he lost all $1,000. Doesn't get it back. Why? Rashi explains that when you received that collateral, you received it with the understanding that if you lose that, you're out. You're out. You have to hold on to it in order to get your money back. But if you were to lose it, so then you're out. However, that's only true by one of them. But if there's two of them, avaltarti kaasi lo. But if you got two collaterals, two handles, and you lose them, I guess you lose one of them, no? Yeah, you only lost one of them. You don't say.
Lost handle with that collateral,
Right. It's all one collateral, and therefore, if you gave him two and you lost one, then we don't say you lost the whole thing. We don't say you lost 500. It's one big collateral that came in the form of two handles. Okay, one more line. It's about time. Let's start from Rav Nachman tomorrow morning.